Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to our repertory. So I'm going to go ahead and stop our little splash page and pull up our document. Today, we actually have homework. How exciting is that? Do we have any questions as we're getting started? I know we've been doing, we've just been doing review of some fairly basic stuff, but these are things that are important for us to make sure that we're clear on as we're getting into it. And I think it's also really useful for us to be aware of what's in the sections and where are the overlaps between the sections, because when we're stuck in the middle of a case, sometimes that's exactly what we need to be aware of. So, are there any questions before we start today? I just love the repertory, and I love teaching the repertory. And so it's way fun for me when I get a chance to dive into this. Okay, are you guys ready? We're going to launch into embarrassing topics today. We're launching ourselves right into the rectum section, which is where we left off last time. So we've been kind of working our way through, and now it sort of gets up close and personal in what we're working with. How many of you at the beginning of like one of the first times that you were talking to a client, you actually had to ask about rectal symptoms, kind of had a little bit of a freak out maybe? I did. I remember sitting there across from somebody thinking, I cannot possibly ask this really nice lady about rectal itching. I just can't. Marjorie, you had that same experience? Yeah, it's tough. So and I guess this is kind of a typical medical practitioner thing, is that you have to go through a process of desensitization, where what would be extreme and weird for you to discuss with your mom at the dinner table needs to become normal so that you can discuss it with your client in a healthcare setting. And one of the ways that we can participate in that desensitization is by reading the repertory. Dr. Kent has done a great service for us in that way. So that's how we're going to launch into this today. So, Dr. Kent's advice. Do you remember last time I showed you that you can download the entire repertory, the original Kent's repertory, and have it in a PDF on your computer or tablet, or I don't know if there's a way to put that on somebody's phone and look through it. I'm not much of a phone techie user, but maybe. So this is taken out of Dr. Kent's introduction to the repertory. And if you want to rip open your repertory, you can probably follow along here. He says in here at the end of his discussion, cross-references have been inserted wherever it was thought they would be needed, but doubtless more could profitably be added. And certainly in our later, newer repertories, like the one that I use the most is the complete repertory, and there are plenty of additional cross-references in there. Many busy men will find groups of remedies under headings different from the one they would naturally look for. And although Kent says many busy men, we have to say many busy women also will find things under different headings than they would naturally look for. If a cross-reference be made at the time, it will always help to find that rubric in the future. So this is one of the cardinal rules. If you look for something somewhere and it's not there, make sure that you stick your finger or thumb in that place to hold it. so that when you finally find it, wherever it is, you are able to go back and put a note in that initial place that says, this is where it is. Now, you can do that by hand in your actual repertory, or you can do it by adding an entry into your electronic repertory as a cross-reference. Either way, it will help you a lot, because it's maddening enough to have searched and searched and searched for something and finally, after like an hour and a half, find it. It is even more maddening when you have to find that same thing later and you know you found it before and you can't remember where. So this is where you want to be really careful to write down your cross-references. And Kent says, if all such cross-references be sent to the author, they will assist in making later editions more complete. So there are, I think that within the Radar business and at Whole Health Now and for Synergy, you can send an email saying, I would like to have this added. So we can think about that. There might be a way for us to collect those here on the Trinity Health Hub and then be able to send them in en masse and ask them to tidy up repertory entries. So he says, physicians are requested to send in verified and clinical symptoms and to call attention to any errors which they may discover in the text. There actually is a huge project that Andre Sain is working on. Dr. Brusalian in Switzerland, there's a whole series of people who are working on this repertory program where they're going through and verifying everything and making sure that it's correct, and they've made some updates and a lot of corrections to the repertory, just improving the quality of our tools. So he says, only in this way can we expect to have a complete and correct repertory. What Dr. Kent is saying here basically is it takes a village, and he's asking all of us to participate. So every practitioner who has clinical experience has the opportunity to make additions here. And, you know, we just want to keep that in mind, that if we see something remarkable, we have the opportunity to make that available to other people. Okay. It is suggested that those who use this repertory should first read all the headings, should first of all read the headings of the general rubrics from beginning to end, and thus become acquainted with the plan upon which it is formed. Remember that Dr. Kent, when he created this, he was gathering stuff from 20, 30 different repertories that all had completely different structures, and he had to make this up. So all of the later repertories are built on the same structure as Dr. Kent's, but we want to become very, very familiar with that. Now, one of the things that can be difficult if you are using one of the electronic repertories, you're using the repertory software, and you get used to using the search can take you to a rubric that does not make it clear what the headings are above it. And so you can end up finding a rubric that's technically not accurate because you're not in the right place for what you're looking for. So, you know, we want to make sure the rubric is only as accurate as its location where we find it. And then Kent gives us one last bit of advice. Only by constant use can any repertory become a companion and helper. You know, I don't know that I could say constant because I have lots of other things that I do in my life, but I certainly can say frequent. And pretty soon you do start to think of the repertory as a friend. This is like somebody wise that I can go to and ask when I need help. So, do any of you guys write book in hand, or do you add notes into your software, into your repertory software? You know, there's a term for these kinds of cross-references that Kent is commenting about. It's called marginalia, and it's actually an official librarian archivist term. Yeah, Marjorie says, I write in my book. Yep. Didn't know we could add to software. We absolutely can. And so in one of our future sessions, I'll put that in there so that I can teach about how. Yeah. So you guys all have your own collection of marginalia. There are people who are experts in marginalia. They go to original manuscripts and they look at it. If you were to look at the Organon, and you know, we have the original 6th edition of Hahnemann's Organon at the library in San Francisco at the UCSF Medical School, where you can go visit it. And you can actually touch this thing that Hahnemann wrote in. It's amazing. And the whole thing is online so that you can see it. And all the places where there's that little thin onion skin tissue paper that he's written on, and he's put a little bit of glue, whatever that kind of, I can't remember, mucilage glue, and then glued them together so that they fold out. You can click on it and it folds. You can watch it fold out. You click on the next one and then it folds out more. When you look at the different things that are written in there, the original assumption with Hahnemann's Organon was that all of the marginalia, all the things that he was writing in this interleaved version of the 5th edition in order to create the 6th edition, it was believed that all of that was his handwriting. But the more you look at it, the more you realize, actually, that's not Hahnemann's handwriting. Some of the marginalia apparently belongs to Richard Hale, who he and Boricke were the ones who went and got it in Germany and brought it back to the US. That's why it sits in San Francisco. It also looks like some of it is Melanie's handwriting. So this, you know, the last time that I was there at the UCSF Med School Library, and I was talking to the archivist who's in charge of the special collections, and he was saying, you know, this would actually be a fantastic graduate student project for somebody to go through and look at all this and evaluate what really is Hahnemann's writing and what is somebody else's writing and whose is it. And what do we know about when these things were added and what they might mean for the content of the 6th edition of the Organon? Interesting stuff, huh? Okay. So a symptom is a rubric. Today we're talking about rectum. And we can see in here there's rectum, pain, burning at stool. So when the person is passing a stool, they have burning pain in their rectum. After a hard stool, and we get to see what remedies are involved in there. Tickling, tickling pain, okay. Worse from urination, worse from vexation, and we can look at the remedies in here, chamomilla and natrum mur, and those remedies are worse from vexation in lots of ways. So, while walking, washing with cold water ameliorates. Okay, so these are all details about a burning experience with pain on passing stool or after passing stool. And then we get down here into, after burning, we get into the next alphabetical descriptor, adjective, which is clawing. Ouch, that sounds really uncomfortable. And then we go down through all the C's, and now we're up at the top of the next column, and we get pain, drawing. Okay, so the way that Kent organized the repertory was to go from section of rectum into symptom and into detail. And the symptoms are rubrics, and the details are subrubrics. And then there's subrubrics of subrubrics. And then there's additional details of that. So we can see that there's rectum as a section, pain as a symptom, drawing pain as a detail, drawing pain after coition as a subdetail, drawing pain after coition extending into the abdomen as an additional subdetail, and extending into the umbilicus or upward. This is a sub-detail. So one of the things that we often will do is assume that whatever is in this tiny subdetail is also in the larger general rubric. Wouldn't you assume that? Lots of people would assume that. It's not true. I wish it were true, but it's not true. It's not even true in the larger, bigger repertories that we work with the complete, with the synthetic, with all these later repertories. And here we have an example of it. Look here. We've got rectum, pain, drawing, and if you follow down, you guys can find this in your own repertory. Extending into abdomen, and then down here we see upwards. Can you guys see my arrow, my little cursor on the screen? Good. Okay, so upwards. Mesothelium, yes, we see mesothelium with drawing pain. Plumbum, no. We do not see plumbum here. Thuya, no, we do not see thuya here. So when it comes down to pain, drawing pain in the rectum that is extending upwards into the abdomen, these are remedies that are not included in the general drawing rubric. Now, this is one of the challenges that we have when we want to select something quite specific that is exactly what the person said, but we don't want to narrow ourselves too much. So we can grab these little bitty rubrics and add them in to the larger, more general rubrics to create something fuller that covers both the exact specific thing that the person said and the broader idea. Any questions about that? So in the structure of the repertory, these things are in alphabetical order generally, except when they're not. And we have a big category like rectum, and a smaller category like pain, and then a detail like drawing pain, and then a smaller detail like drawing pain that's extending into the abdomen, and then a tiny detail like drawing pain extending into the abdomen that's moving upwards. And so Kent did this. We can think of this as a tree structure where it just goes into finer and finer and finer levels of detail. But unlike a tree where the little branches on the end are definitely included in the larger branches in the middle, it's not true with the repertory. So these small branches on the end have incredible value and incredible accuracy that doesn't necessarily go up the chain. This is a really important thing to remember about the structure. Questions about any of that? Okay, so here's our same diagram about Kent's arrangement. And today we're going to see if we can get through rectum and stool and urinary organs. We're going to see how far we can get. Oops. Okay, so if you open up your repertory, how would you describe a drawing pain? It's pulling. It is a sense as if something from one place is being pulled somewhere else. So sometimes people will have this sensation like in their hamstrings where they feel too short, or it's as if something is pulling. Sometimes people will describe it as if a muscle in their arm is being pulled upward. So that's what drawing pain is, as if something is being drawn in some direction. And yes, do I mean to combine the smaller one? Absolutely. We want to take this smaller thing and add it in, add those remedies in with the larger one in our rubric repertorization so that we get a good full set. Okay, any other questions? All right. So in the rectum section, we don't have a section for intestines. That's happening in the abdomen. And abdomen is full of all kinds of things. But in rectum, we know that we're dealing specifically with GI things. And so here's where we get to separate out, oh, it's no longer possibly something to do with the ovaries, or something to do with the musculoskeletal system, or something to do with the ureters. Here, it's just the GI tract. So this is all about the form and function of the lower bowel and the rectum and the anus. So this is where we're going to find things like constipation and diarrhea and hemorrhoids and worms and everything else that you can't possibly discuss at the dinner table. Now, there are also things here for specific references to the perineum. And, you know, that area right between the vaginal opening and the rectum, it's not included generally in the rectum section. Usually it's included in female genitalia, but not always. Anything that has to do with the GI tract, like a fissure that's going into the perineum, you would expect to find it under rectum. Can you find a rubric for dysentery? Got your repertories? Take a look. Can you find a rubric for dysentery? You know, if we were actually dealing with a client with dysentery, for example, when I came back from, I think, my third or fourth trip to Haiti with Homeopaths Without Borders, I had dysentery. And the Balnoso Dysentery Co. worked like a miracle. So fast. I've never been so grateful for anything in my entire life as for that. Yes, rectum dysentery. So this would be if you knew somebody had dysentery, but there might be other things that are related to their specific individualized symptoms that wouldn't be covered in here. So remember that even though we can find the specific complaint in a rubric, we always want to be focused on the symptoms. Okay, so rectum has to do with the form and function and modes of appearance of bowel contents. But it's not until we actually get to stool that we start talking about all the really interesting things that the body produces. Now, remember that when Kent wrote this, people still used chamber pots more frequently than they do now. And he was working based on rubrics that were developed during an era of chamber pots. But this is, so he observes things like a greasy film on the surface of the water, which we might not ever see or hear about because the person just does their business and flushes. So, oh, wow. Interesting. Marie says not in synthesis rectum dysentery. Okay. So we want to be careful here in stool. If we are looking, if somebody says, okay, I didn't eat anything different than I usually did, and I just had a stool that was chalk white. Can you find a rubric for that? Or maybe they say, wow, I just had diarrhea that was green. It looks like chopped spinach. Can you find a rubric for that? We need to get really good at knowing this, and we need to get also good at asking the questions. What does the stool look like? And so often people will say, oh, it's just normal. Well, what exactly does normal mean for you? So for some people, normal means little rocks. For some people, it means big logs. One of the really useful things you can do, have you guys seen Dr. Oz's poop chart? If you go Google poop chart, you'll be able to see what something that you can very easily show to clients in your office. You have the Bristol chart. Great. Yeah, you can show it to them and say, point out yours. What does yours look like? And then if people have a change in color, it's almost always a really important indicator of what's happening with the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. So if they have all of a sudden a very greasy stool, that's usually indicative of something going on with the pancreas. If they have a stool that's yellow, mustard yellow, that says that there's definitely something happening with the liver. If they have bright green in their stool or green flecks, it usually means that the gallbladder is dumping bile. So you want to make sure that you ask people, what does it look like? And you have to ask, how did it show up? In what way did it appear? You know, are you having explosions into the toilet? And people will come up with really creative things. Well, it's kind of like soft serve ice cream. And I think, oh, okay, well, that gives you a really clear idea, doesn't it? So we want to be adamant about getting comfortable with ourselves. Let's use Dr. Kent's sections on rectum and stool to desensitize ourselves so that we can comfortably have these conversations with clients. All right? So keep practicing. You should be able to list off the section names. Is smells a section name in the repertory that comes right after nose? Do we find smells there? Is bones a section after extremities? Not in Kent. Neither of these are sections. Smells are included within the nose and bones, and sometimes in lungs. And bones are included in extremities or in chest, like the ribs, or where, you know, the skull is in the head section. They don't have their own section, although there are references to them in generalities. So keep going with the abbreviations for the remedy names. Are you guys working on those, learning them? I still learn things when I scan through them, and I do this on a regular basis. Have you seen in the listing at the beginning of Kent's repertory, Paulinia sorbilis? Do you know this remedy, Paulinia? It's guarana. You know, that thing that was outlawed, that people were no longer allowed to put in power drinks? That's what Paulinia is. So we learn a lot from just becoming more familiar with what these things are. And we want to get very clear about the arrangement in the repertory so that we can flip open to the repertory easily. Have you guys got tabs? I put little tabs that stick out on mine, you know, those plasticized ones. I stuck those on mine, and it made it easier to flip through them very quickly to find things. You've got tabs on yours, Marie, great. Okay, so mind section comes first, generalities comes last, And what I'd like to encourage you to do this week, your assignment while you're doodling around, if you've got 5 minutes, draw a little stick figure of a person. And then write the name of each section and point to where it goes. Write the number. See if you write out the sections in the order that they are in the repertory and point. And it will give you a little bit of insight into the way that Kent did it. You might start first going down the left side of the body. You know, Kent goes down a certain way and then comes back up and starts over. So see if you can figure out, what was Kent thinking about? He was very specific and deliberate about the way that he put these in order. You know, unlike Robin Murphy, he didn't just say, well, we're going to alphabetize. Kent was a Swedenborgian, and the philosophy of Swedenborg about health, disease, anatomy, physiology, and the way the spirit imbues physical form all influenced the way that Kent created this. So see what you can figure out about that. All right, so Kent tells us that by constant use, by frequent use, that's how we're going to get comfortable and make the repertory into a useful companion for us. So given our topics today, would it be too strange this week to just leave your repertory in the bathroom for random reading? And whenever you're in there, you just pick it up and read through a few pages. Let's see how that works out this week. Do you guys have any comments or questions? Okay. Marie says it's on her nightstand. Yep. And it's a fabulous place for it. You can sit and read. All right, guys, have a fabulous week, and I will talk to you soon. Take good care. Bye-bye.